How's Indiana?
It is hotter than Hades, and we're going to have a record hot streak starting tomorrow.
I'm glad I'm back here, even though we're having horrible temperatures. We at least don't have the humidity. So.
Yeah, and that's what's so bad here. But I'm going to be at the lake all next week. I got a girls' 22nd annual Girls Week at the lake.
Ah, nice.
I host. So.
Which lake?
It's Cordery and Sweetwater. It's down in Brown County.
Yeah, I know that. We used to go camping there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my dad, my sister, and I. My mother was not a camper, but we would go camping.
Well, and I heard you were in Indiana. Was it last week?
I got back a week ago today. I got back. I was there for a week. Did the usual Indiana stuff. We went to St. Elmo's. We went to an Indians game. We didn't make it to Bongi's for dinner, but pretty much all the other stuff we do. Have you ever been to Bongi's?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite places on the planet. So,
it is delightful. I'm not a waiter, so I don't like to wait. But obviously, it is a tradition to tailgate and wait.
We always go. I think they open at like 4:30, so we get there about a quarter after and get in line, and we just skip lunch. It works. So anyway, so the point of this here, Rob wanted an article on empathy and sees how you have a book out. It's also a good way to promote your book and you and what you do. So I thought I would just kind of interview you about empathy, and then I create a blog and certainly will CC you on it.
Okay, you're kind of fading in and out. I think you need to be a little bit closer to your computer.
Let me just turn it up.
That's better.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we just want to write a blog or an article about empathy and kind of base it on an interview with you and mention your book and all the things you do and all that good stuff. So if that works for you.
Absolutely. Empathy is a thing.
All right. So just to get us started, just tell me, the short version of Carol the Coach. Who are you? What do you do, etc.
Well, I'll just to bring you up to speed. I am a life coach of 10 years and a mental health therapist of 39. And I am in the field of sex addiction and partner betrayal. I wrote a book called Help Her Heal. And this is, you got it. Okay. So my empathy is really for partner betrayal. It's for couples that have been terribly fractured, and the sex addict has a lot of difficulty figuring out how to do empathy. And then they get so much backlash because the partner is so betrayed, she can't trust it. So that's the stick. That's what happens. And, they would typically retreat. Who else am I? I had a radio show on WIBC. I had 2 of them called Sex, Love, and Relationships with Carol the Coach. Are you recording this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And and on WXNT. And I've probably done over 1,000 television segments on mental health and life coaching and goal setting. So my big thing is to disseminate education, psychoeducation, and help people to figure out what they need to do next.
Okay, cool. So you actually transitioned from being a therapist into life coaching?
No, I do both.
But you do, so you do both now?
Yeah, I actually did. Yeah, I also wrote a column for 5 years in the Indy Star, their Sunday Star, called Carol the Coach. And I told them I was in training to be a coach because I had signed up for my first course. And that was the August before 9/11. And as a result, everything was canceled. The airports, the flights, the conferences. Yeah. And I decided, oh gosh, I got to get my coaching degree because they had just hired me to be a coach.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then when I got done with coaching, they asked me, what are you going to do next? And I said, well, now I want to learn about sex addiction.
Yeah.
And so I have found I have 2 podcasts. I have one podcast that has over 750,000 open downloads a week.
Yeah.
And that is I'm the godmother of podcasting. I had the first one on sex addiction and partner betrayal. And then I just started a year ago for AppSats, which is the article that you helped me with a partner betrayal only podcast. And that's got, I think I saw 64,000 open downloads. It's been over a year.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing. I'm always amazed at how well podcasts do. People listen to them in the car when they're sitting around waiting on somebody. They just, it's kind of cool. Okay, so let's get to our topic.
Okay.
Now, a lot of this is kind of basic. It's covered in the workbook, but I'm going to ask the questions anyway. How do you define empathy?
Empathy is the ability to put oneself into somebody else's shoes and understand how they feel. It's very different than sympathy. It really is about feeling their feelings and understanding their situation.
Are men naturally not as good at empathy as women in general?
Yes, I believe that women have an innate ability because they bear children, and they have to have that ability to form relationships right off the bat. And so they're more relationship oriented, and to be good in relationships, you have to be able to do empathy. I believe women have been socialized to be empathetic, where men have not necessarily been socialized.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. There's also differences in the brain structure where, women are much more communication between the hemispheres, and that seems to be in a lot of ways how empathy works. I would think that's sort of an evolutionary thing. Women for thousands of years have been socialized to be mothers and caregivers. Men are...
Got it. As well as you're right, the right brain, where men have been left brain, so that they could provide and take care of in a totally different way.
Yeah. So in an intimate relationship, how important is empathy? And I'm not talking about a sex addiction relationship. I'm talking about any intimate relationship. How important of a component is empathy?
I believe it is the foundation for a good relationship because it involves vulnerability, feelings, trust, and sharing. And so when you have those ingredients in a relationship, you're much more likely to connect on an emotional basis.
Are intimacy and empathy the same thing then, or are they just highly interrelated?
Highly interrelated. Intimacy is obviously that ability to form a solid connection, and empathy is the way to get there.
Cool. Okay, so let's get on to sex addicts here. So sex addicts in their active addiction, in early recovery, what is their level of empathy for partners and just in general even?
Well, we really don't know because there's not been enough studies as to, is there a predisposition towards a lack of empathy in sex addicts, and that contributes to their ability to look for dopamine hits and be isolated and meet their own needs, which further decreases the ability to have empathy. So we don't know, were they born like that, or did sexual addiction rob them of their ability to be empathetic and their ability to stay connected and form solid relationships? You cannot be an addict and hold secrets and be empathetic and develop intimacy. It's impossible.
Yeah, any sex addict who had empathy for his wife or partner, or she had empathy for the wife or partner, wouldn't be able to do what they do. I mean,
yes, and in all fairness to addicts, I do believe there are some sex addicts that, well, any kind of addict actually, but I do believe there are sex addicts who did have empathy, and then they got involved in a behavior that became so compulsive that it interrupted their ability to maintain empathy. So I'm not saying that you can't have empathy before addiction. I guess I'm disputing what you just said a little bit. For those people that especially got into some sort of porn addiction,
Right.
and that became such a habitual compulsive problem that before they knew it, their number one goal was to find more porn. And you know about sex
overrides
addiction.
the empathy.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. What I was saying was when you're active in your addiction, if you were feeling empathy for your partner, you would not be able to do the things you're doing
Right.
and sort of reconcile that.
Right. Although the sex addicts I work with, they say that they end up having empathy directly after they get their dopamine hit. That they'll go seek a prostitute out and then feel terribly bad about it. They'll feel like they ruined their relationship with their wife, and they'll promise themselves, I'll never do that again. And then 20 minutes later, 2 hours later, 2 weeks later, they're at it again. So they can do the dance back and forth, but they really can't be vulnerable long term with their wives. And they don't want that empathy, because if they see that empathy, they're going to hate themselves even more. A lot of self-loathing and sexual addiction.
Yeah, shame is the master emotion with pretty much all addictions, but especially sex and porn addiction.
Yeah.
So I'm in recovery for all of this. So
I wonder how you met Rob.
Yeah, that's how we know each other. So let's talk about the workbook a little bit. It walks. It's primarily aimed at the addict rather than the betrayed partner, as nearly as I can tell. And it walks them through the steps of developing or redeveloping empathy. Can you talk a little bit about the steps and the progression, and how long does it take, to really feel it, that kind of thing?
Well, it's interesting because I definitely wrote it for addicts, and they walk through understanding their own brain. It is surprising how many men may go to 12-step meetings, but they don't learn about sex addiction being a brain dysfunction or disorder.
Yeah.
And so the beginning of the book helps them to understand why they have a sex addiction, and helps them to understand that dopamine hit and the chemicals that are produced, and the fact that it can traumatize them. And then we talk about the partner's brain and the fact that when she finds out that she's been betrayed, it affects her amygdala, which puts her in fight, flight, or freeze, which then affects the anterior cingulate, which then affects her ability to process information. Her executive functioning goes offline, and she behaves very differently than she's ever behaved in a relationship. So when you got that trauma dance going on, it is very difficult for an addict to know how to proceed. And again, they typically either defend themselves and get very defensive, or they retreat, and they retreat into isolation. And I come from a belief that because he betrayed her, or obviously it could be she betrayed him, depending on if the addict's the male or the female, but because he betrayed her, he's the only one that can help her heal if they stay in relationship. Now, if she decides to divorce or separate, then she can help herself heal. And she can in an unhealthy marriage, but he really is pivotal in helping her heal. And he has to do that by developing empathy. And then learning the skills in the book that I talk about, for instance, really understanding his own feelings. And I really simplify it to the top 5. I simplify it to anger, sadness, loneliness, fear, and happiness, and then shame and guilt over here, because those are the 5 primary feelings he feels. And when he starts doing exercises in this book to understand that, then he's much more likely to be able to recognize her feelings. So it's simultaneous. Then after the feelings section of the book, We have communication, the 4 styles of communication. Does he have a tendency to relate passively, especially now that he has devastated her and put her in the fetal position? You know, does he just kind of shut down and let her say anything, do anything, feel anything, and he can't respond? Or does he get aggressive and he sticks up for himself, which of course is not what she needs because she really is betrayed? Or does he get passive aggressive? You know, it gets too much for him and he just walks out the door, slams it, and doesn't come back for a couple days, you know, only to make her think that he's acting out some more. Of course, we teach him assertiveness, that 4 style of communication, because he needs to be clear and direct about what he thinks, feels, and wants. But in discovery of sexual addiction, and it's very difficult for an addict to feel assertive because they feel like they don't have the right. You know, they have devastated her and they don't have the right to ask for what he needs or ask what they need. And so I kind of spoon feed them how to be gently assertive by first recognizing her pain, asserting himself, and then reminding her that he knows he caused the pain. And when you sandwich assertiveness like that, it goes much, much better. And then we talk about AVR, a formula that I created that's acknowledging the issue, validating the primary feeling, and then reassuring her of the change. Now, the only way that can happen is if he has some good sobriety. And by good sobriety, I'm not talking lengthy, but I am saying at least 90 days of sobriety, as well as I advocate with the empathy process for a formal disclosure, which is that process by which he shares everything. And he answers all of her questions. It usually takes 3 or 4 hours. It takes weeks to prepare. And it's her way of knowing the truth so she can decide how she wants to proceed. If she doesn't want a disclosure, that's absolutely fine. That's her choice. But so it goes discovery, and then it goes sobriety. And, you know, that's when I get them hooked up with the 10 tools that I think are imperative for recovery. You know, meetings, mentor or sponsor, whatever book they're reading, which would be the green book or the white book for sex addiction, or, you know, or Every Man's Battle, whatever. And then doing the 12-step work, because that's so important, and having fellowship. That's the first 5. This 5 happens to be going to a certified sexual addictions therapist, somebody who knows what they're doing. That's me. Being part, Patrick Carnes taught me, if there's one thing you can do for somebody, you can provide them good group therapy. And so I've always, since that time, I have run sex addiction groups, because it's a wonderful container for men to practice empathy in the group that they can then take home with them.
And also practice honesty.
Yeah. That 3rd thing, the 8th thing, 7th thing is prayer, meditation, or journaling. It can be 1, 2, or 3 of those things. Reading about sexual addiction separate from their treatment. And then accountability tools. And this is what was the hardest thing for me to deal with, is I never thought I would work with couples and encourage polygraph tests. You know, as a matter of fact, 30 years ago, before I worked with sex addiction, when clients would ask me, can you give my husband a polygraph test? Can you give our teenager a polygraph test? I said, I would rather slit my wrist that way than ever do something like that. But now I find it's incredibly helpful in establishing or reestablishing some trust for her that he means what he says, that he says what he means. And it also helps to hold him accountable. He knows he's going to get polygraph tests at least a couple times a year at the beginning of his treatment.
Yeah.
So that is an incredible tool that he can give to her. And it actually shows empathy. You know, he's able to say, I understand why you can't trust me, and I'm willing to do this to show you I'm in good recovery and I'm working on our relationship.
Yeah.
So we do that. And then I have, I believe that in healthy relationships, which sex addiction is not, in healthy relationships, conflict breeds intimacy. You know, you may fight and move away and growl and all sorts of things, but then you come back together and you feel closer. So in unhealthy relationships where sexual addiction and partner betrayal has occurred, I teach the addict how to depersonalize some of the conflict, to know he caused it, to know that he's at the root of it, but not to take it on or in so that he, you know, I don't want him going down that shame cycle, because if he does that, he won't be able to contain her feelings and contain her hurt. So I have the 7 principles of depersonalizing conflict so that he can really be there for her and hold her pain. And then, you know, we talk about the techniques that you need to do to develop empathy, the weekly, monthly, daily check-ins. We talk about reflective listening and how important it is to do that to decrease the defensiveness in communication. Talk about mirroring, all the tools that you need to rebuild a relationship and let your partner know where you are. And of course, for the addict, for him to really listen to what she has to say and use that reflectively means that he's not sitting there concocting his own defense. So it's a pretty simple book, but I've had docs and psychiatrists that have sexual addiction that said, where was this book 30 years ago when I first had this problem? So I know that even, I mean, it's not for dummies. It is for people that want to be reminded that they have a voice to show her that they care and that they want to help. And then the whole premise is, and it's really my belief system, that when he uses empathy to restore the relationship and she begins to heal, it, like a 12-step program, helps him to heal and increases his self-esteem. So it goes full circle. And it's a tough process because partner betrayal takes about the same amount of time to heal, 3 to 5 years. And that's what we know the arousal template needs to redevelop new neural circuitry that's healthy. So they're doing this dance together, working on their own issues. The big difference is she didn't cause it, she didn't contribute to it, and you know, she says, this is a club I never wanted to be in. I can't believe I'm having to deal with this because of him.
Yeah, I love a couple of things about what you just said. Number one, that you start with the brain. I find, particularly with men, if I can tell them what's happening in their brain and why their addiction is escalating and why, you know, more and more and more and different, and, you know, they can understand that. And then when, you know, explaining fight, flight, freeze, they get a better sense of their wife. It's just a natural trauma reaction. You know, she doesn't hate you. She's doesn't know, you know, her lizard brain is kicking in and she's screaming at you.
Right.
And then you work through to, you know, skills like reflective listening that can help in a situation like that. You know, I hear you're angry. I think this is what I'm hearing you're angry about. If so, I absolutely agree with you, you know, that kind of thing. But if I'm wrong, please tell me why, you know, all of that stuff. I mean, I assume I didn't get that far in the book yet. I got about halfway through. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it's a nice step-by-step, one thing at a time, starting at the very beginning, which is, you know, with the addiction and why it happens. So that's great. So, you know, Rob always talks a lot in his books about rigorous honesty as a way of restoring relationship trust. I think he doesn't talk enough about empathy. Would you agree that those travel hand in hand and you're not going to have one without the other and vice versa?
Oh, 100%. When these men come to me, I say, I want to help you transform to be honest, authentic, and transparent. And you've just spent a lifetime or a decade or 2 decades doing just the opposite. And so honesty is also at the root of the work we're going to be doing. And that's really scary because, you know, at the time of disclosure, his biggest fear is that she's going to crumble and die, or she's going to start punching him out. You know, that's a fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
Now, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of disclosures, and I have only seen one woman crumble, and I had to pick her up off the floor, and then I had to pick her up off the parking lot. Most women hear the material, they ask questions, and they end up saying to me either right then and there or during the next session, I feel so relieved to know now what I'm dealing with. And I have never had a disclosure end in divorce. I have had some couples that have decided to separate and divorce, but that wasn't because of the disclosure. It was about the trauma that she could not manage because it just was too much for her. And separation and divorce was going to allow her time to heal without the association of seeing him. But
I assume you would never recommend a disclosure to a couple that knows they're going to divorce anyway. I mean, what would
well, that's an interesting question. Originally, when I trained with ITAP, they said absolutely not. I now am a proponent of and on the board and train for APSATS, which is a partner-sensitive trauma group. And we really believe that she has the right to know whether she's leaving, coming or going. Now, the founder and myself, we live in the Midwest. Barb Steffens lives in Cincinnati, and I live in Indiana, and this is a no-fault state. So it doesn't matter if he's been to 14 transgendered prostitutes for 50 years or 140.
Right.
As long as it doesn't jeopardize the care of the kids, the court doesn't care. They don't want to know the dirty. So I do realize that I might have a different recommendation if I practiced out of California, for instance.
Yeah.
You can get lynched for some of those behaviors. Not really, but you know, I mean.
You can lose custody.
Yeah. So my answer is yes and no. I believe the partner deserves the truth no matter what she's going to do. Most partners don't want a disclosure if they're going to divorce. They don't want more information filling their head. They've already discovered it some way, usually a text or a blackmail, or their kids find the emails. And then they start searching on their own. So they've gathered up lots of information, sometimes almost all the information that the disclosure is going to reveal. The disclosure is a process to create a formal way to do that in a safe container with therapists that can guide it, make sure everybody's safe, including the addict, and then set up that polygraph for the very next day so that we can decrease the anxiety and she knows that she knows everything. And I've only had one woman that I worked with knew everything. But for most women, they know 65%, and then they find out 35% more.
Yeah. So let's say you've got a new sex addict who walks into your office, and he wants to start displaying empathy right away. What are the 3 things he can start doing today that will tell his wife, I really do care, I messed up, I feel horrible about it, I really do care how you're feeling?
Well, the 3 things, the first one starts with him. He can work a really solid recovery program so that she sees he has an action plan. Then he can practice journaling about his feelings every day and bringing that into the therapist so we can talk about it. And then working with AVR, again, acknowledging the issue, validating the feelings, and reassuring her that he cares enough that he wants to do that. You know, in early recovery, he can't say, look, I've been clean for 4 months and I just did the disclosure. He's really saying, look, I've been wanting to change my life. I am devastated that you're devastated, and I want to start doing it differently. Those are probably the first 3 things he can do. And my belief is, at least here in good old Indiana, although I'm doing this all over the world now because of my podcast, being a coach, I can do empathy coaching and work with people all over. But my belief is the people who contact me, they want this. They're not just doing it to scam their wife. Yeah. You know, if they want to scam their wife, they want out. They're doing it because they want to change. They've hated who they've been. They haven't known how to get out of it. Now they know how to get out of it. And so for me, sexual addiction is an interpersonal recovery issue for the man and a relational issue for the woman and the coupleship. So I would never advocate for couples therapy right off the bat, but I would call it early couples recovery work that is absolutely defined in my book. I mean, the skills that I just talked about are early couples recovery work so that they can stay in the same house or stay in the same city or take care of their kids together. It's a way that they can function and decide, can we do this together? Can I begin to trust you again? And that trust does not occur for a long time. But if they keep doing what they do, it works. It's just like a 12-step program. When you work it, it does work.
Yeah, at the beginning of the relationship, when you first meet, you know, trust is freely given. Once you've violated the trust, you have to earn it back, and it's a process. So, wonderful. That's a ton of material for me to work with. Is there anything else you want to add about empathy before we sign off?
I believe one of the things I want to say is that premise that I come from, that I believe he can help her heal and improve his self-esteem in the process, is an APSATS principle. And so I want to give them credit for that, because that's what makes their program so special with sex addicts and partners. And they do have some formulas. And so I really appreciate their foundation. It's much different than what I learned. I'm not saying what I learned before wasn't good, but it was still sex addict centric. And, you know, you got to start somewhere. So, and I always tell my people, my couples, whatever, that we're all pioneers in this field, because the internet has made this a ground floor. The other thing that I really want to stress is that when I work with my clients, I do my very best to get both the addict and the partner in the office at least the very first time. I feel like that's a way to develop empathy with both of them. I'm sharing how he must feel because of my work with addicts, so she gets to hear it, and I'm sharing the devastation and the fact that, you know, she punched him in the chest last night and she's never had a history of violence. That's the brain. We can calm that down. He's got to help me. She can do it on her own, but it expedites things for him to be a part of this. And so
even though he's your client, you want her there the first session?
Yes. And if
or vice versa.
Right. Well, right. Well, usually it's the woman that either contacts me about him or she gives him my information because she's done the research. I am, Scott, the only CSAT in Indianapolis, and I've been the only CSAT since 2007 for 12 years.
Yeah.
Chicago has over 200.
Yeah.
You know, we're a big city too. I don't know what the heck's going on.
I know. And it's always the wife that calls too. 90% of our inquiries are from the wife.
Exactly. And is that the treatment center?
Yeah, treatment, and even just people contacting us through the website or the podcast or whatever, you know, the webinars. It's always the women. Even our webinars for addicts, there are as many partners on the webinars that are specific to addicts as there are addicts. And often they're on together, which is nice, I think.
Well, that's how I figured it out. You know, I said I was the first podcast, and after about the first year, I never even thought to look at my demographics. It didn't matter to me. And so I look and I see 52% of my listening audience are female. And I went, those aren't female sex addicts. Those are women trying to figure out what the hell is going on in their life.
Yeah, my husband won't stop looking at porn. What do I do? You know.
Right. And how can I be safe? Safety and stabilization is absolutely the first part of the process of developing trust. So he is learning all these safety skills to make her feel better, especially since he created the monster.
Yeah.
And that's not her. That's the addiction.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful. I will write this up. I'll send it to you before we publish anywhere, just so you can give it a read through, make sure you're happy with it.
I have two questions about you.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Obviously, you have incredible editing skills. Were you an English major?
I I did my undergrad, and I got a double degree in electrical engineering and economics. And then I went to law school, and then I got a master's in writing. But always, even from the time I was a little kid, I really wanted to be a writer. And I just spent a lot of time figuring out careers that I didn't want. And then I became a book publisher, and then transitioned into ghostwriting, and now this. So almost everything I write now deals with addiction or mental health or sometimes medical stuff.
Well, what you did for my article was amazing. And, Darren Ford, who is a CSAT, who published this, he has Sano Press and he has Sano Recovery Center. I'm sure he can't afford you, but he's always looking for good copywriters, editors. And really what you did for that article was amazing.
Well, thank you. I like doing it. So, I like what I do. I get out of bed and I get to do this, and it makes me happy. And particularly, I get to do this in a way that helps people in the way that I've been helped. So that's really important to me.
Okay. Well, okay. And then the second question I had is, how do you know Rob?
A million years ago, Rob was my therapist.
Okay, I wondered if it was
long enough ago that we can work together without any conflict issues. We started working together almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
And helping him with his books, and officially I'm an official employee now of Seeking Integrity. Although I still do some freelance, obviously. So, and we're going to start publishing books through Seeking Integrity. We're going to create a press. So.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Something to keep in mind as well down in the future. So.
Well, that's good for me to keep in mind, although I would not want to betray Darren.
Yeah, no.
He's just starting out. But.
Yeah, and he and I should probably talk at some point. So, if you wanted to even give him my email, I'd be happy to chat with him. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much for doing what you did for the article and for interviewing me. And, I've said to Rob, whatever I can do to help. He was talking about maybe me doing some Zoom classes for the staff, which I think he said is all of 2 people.
Yeah, it's kind of growing, but yeah, that would be cool. And podcasts or maybe a webinar, just fill in for somebody, like if somebody can't make it one week, or there's tons of different things. Do you know Tammy Verhelst?
Tammy Reynolds?
No, Verhelst.
Oh, yes. Tammy.
Now she's with us. So she's the one who schedules all that stuff. So if you ever want to do anything, or if you ever write a blog and you want an outlet for it, contact me or Tammy, and we'll set it up.
As long as you edit it, I'll be happy to. I've written over 1,000 blogs. Now, they're not all on sex addiction, but I have over 150 YouTubes, and then I have them transcribed, and then I clean them up.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the other thing is I am creating right now a Help Her Heal course for people that really like to hear it as opposed to read it.
Yeah.
So I might offer that to Rob too, for his staff, because we really want his center to be partner sensitive.
Yeah, that's absolutely. He's been in contact with Barbara too about working together on this kind of stuff. And,
I know I've been at all those meetings.
Yeah, yeah, especially with, he's obviously enamored with codependence for obvious reasons, but he's always looking for ways to work with, and he wants to work with AppSets rather than any of the other organizations.
I think anytime you break away, you make some, I don't want to say enemies, but people start.
There are some people who aren't going to be real happy with him right now. He just attacked their life's work.
Right, I know, exactly. And yet what I've seen him do, and I said it in that article, is, he's creating a whole new paradigm that's really going to be helpful for caregivers and loved ones.
It's not that big of a change. It's just reconceptualizing the work we've been doing and reconceptualizing how we think about partners. They are traumatized. Let's accept that they're traumatized.
Right, that they're not borderline, they're traumatized.
Yeah, they're not crazy.
Right.
They got cheated off.
They are acting crazy, but that's trauma.
Yeah, that's normal. That's a normal trauma response. So.
Exactly.
Okay, I sent you an email earlier asking for a headshot and a copy of the cover. So
okay, so you want a cover and a headshot. Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I just got off work. It's 6:45 here, so. Okay,
well, try not to swelter in the record heat.
Thank you. Yeah, my cabin, it's not cabin, it's really a cottage, has a long screened-in porch that houses all 15 of these women. But when it's 98, we've got fans shooting out both sides, and it's still a sweat lodge.
Yeah.
So I will. Thank you, and it's good to meet you. And I have a feeling we'll be working on more things together.
Yeah, I'm always available, so email or call anytime.
Okay, if I write something that's pro-dependence, I'll send it to you.
Or anything, because sex addiction, anything to do with addiction, sex addiction, partners, codependence.
So you don't care if we mute, like if I use it on my website and you get to use it on yours?
Yeah, I'll just, usually with that kind of stuff, I'll just link it to your website and it helps cross-pollinate traffic. So
I like it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you later.
Okay. Boo and I are going to go eat. Right, Boo?
Bye, Bill.
Bye.
Good night.
Okay.